So, welcome back. Now, carrying forward the OER series of Zoological Society of Assam, let us today try to understand the concept of threatened species with our prime focus of attention being the IUCN Red List. Now, when we speak of our threatened species in India, what comes to our mind are the schedules which are given on the back of Wildlife Protection Act. No doubt, those schedules are used for categorization of threatened species, but along with that, IUCN Red List, which acts as a gold standard for international categorization of the threat of the species, is also used in India. So now let us first go into learning objectives. Say, after going through this lecture, we will get to know what is the meaning of the red list, its aims and its importance, what are the red list categories, what are their definitions, and we'll cite a few examples. Then meaning of threatened species and the criteria on the basis of which they are delineated, and what are the uses and limitations of the red list concept. Now, what basically is red list? Established in 1964 by IUCN, the red list of threatened species has today evolved to become world's most comprehensive information source of what? Of global extinction risk status of animals, fungi, and plant species. So, what does the red list provide us with? Firstly, it is a list of threatened species. What does it provide us with? It provides us with a list of animal, fungi, and plant species which are facing extinction risk worldwide or globally. Now let us look into what is the aim of IUCN Red List. The IUCN Red List aims at categorizing species at risk of extinction on the basis of what? On the basis of the severity of threats which are facing them, estimating the imminence of their extinction. So the point is, if we do not conserve these species, they are threatened with extinction, and the severity of the threats, on the basis of that, the species are categorized into different categories in the IUCN Red List. Now let us look into what is the importance of IUCN Red List. Firstly, it is a critical indicator of the health of world's biodiversity. Fine, we'll come to that again. Secondly, it provides us information about the species. What sort of information? We get to know its range, its population size, the habitat in which it occurs, ecology, what uses it is put to, what are the trade threats, and conservation actions that will have that will help inform necessary conservation decisions. So all this information is provided by the red list. Along with that, since species can only be conserved in the habitats, so the IUCN red list also gives us information about key sites and habitats that need to be protected, where these species are found. Conservation, we know, is a social process. And what we need to do from time to time is that we need to catalyze action for biodiversity conservation and policy. And the IUCN Red List has today become a powerful tool for the same. Ultimately, the IUCN Red List helps us to guide and inform future conservation and funding priorities. That is, in future, if we need to focus our attention someplace, somewhere, what that place will be, which species should we focus on, where is it that we should put our funds. All this is indicated by the IUCN Red List. Barometer of Life. Now, interestingly, IUCN Red List is called as the Barometer of Life. Just as a barometer measures atmospheric pressure to help us prepare for adverse weather conditions, the IUCN Red List measures the pressures acting on species. This guides and informs conservation action to help prevent extinctions. And for this reason, the IUCN Red List is often called as the Barometer of Life. So now we are going to look into the different IUCN Red List categories. So herein we are going to look into the structure of the categories. There are 9 basic categories, and we will be looking basically into the names of the categories, and the definitions of the same will come on in the later on slides. Now, taken from the viewpoint of IUCN, first we start with all species on planet Earth. So what IUCN says is that they may either have been evaluated according to the criteria laid down by IUCN, or they may not have been evaluated. So these are the two divisions. Basically, the species, all the species on planet Earth, either they have undergone evaluation or they have not been evaluated. Now, once an effort is taken for the evaluation of the species, sometimes it so happens that even though we want to evaluate the species, enough data on the same is not present. On the other hand, what we may also have is the case that adequate data may be there. So again, two different options come in. That is, species, if the data is not there for proper evaluation, they are called data deficient. And if data is present or adequate data is present, then we may be able to evaluate the species according to the criteria laid down by IUCN. Now, herein, the first two categories are extinct and extinct in the wild. Next three are critically endangered, endangered, and vulnerable. Now, what we basically need to understand out here is that these three categories together are called threatened categories. So, threatened as such is not a category in itself, but it is a combination of three categories. What are they? Critically endangered, endangered, and vulnerable. Along with that, we also have the near threatened and the least concerned. Fine. So these are the 9 categories which are distinguished by IUCN. And what do they basically represent? They represent the extinction risk. That is, as we go from the lower to the higher categories, that is, we move from least concern to near threatened to vulnerable to endangered, critically endangered, and so on. The risk of extinction of the species keeps on increasing. Now, the first category is extinct. A taxon is extinct when there is no doubt that the last individual has died. Now, it is presumed extinct when exhaustive surveys have been taken in its known or expected habitat at all appropriate times, diurnal, day and night, seasonal, annual basis, throughout the range where it was found historically, but we have failed to record an individual, then it is presumed extinct, and the surveys are carried out over a time frame which is appropriate to the life cycle of the taxon. So, if the last individual has died, then in that case, the species is called extinct. Example we have is dodo, Rufus cuculatus. Now, dodo was an endemic bird to the Mauritius. It was endemic to the Mauritius island, and it has been extinct for nearly around 350 years now. The last sighting of dodo was made in around 1662. Now, there was earlier a issue wherein a pink-headed duck, Rhodonesia caryophyllaceae, was called extinct, but today, if you look into the IUCN website, it is listed as critically endangered. So there is a chance that the species still might be surviving, although the population given is around somewhere between 1 to 50 individuals. Next is extinct in the wild. So it is extinct in the wild when the species is known to survive only in cultivation or in captivity, or as naturalized populations or populations well outside the past range, that it is no longer found in its original natural habitat. The rest of the two, presumed extinct in the wild and how the survey should be carried out, is similar to that what we talked of in extinct species. Now the example is the black soft-shell turtle Nilsonia nigricans. Now this species was declared to be extinct in the wild by IUCN in the year 2002, around 18 years back. Interestingly, today it is found in many temple ponds of Assam. Say we have it in Hayagriva Madhav temple in Hajo. So it survives basically only in captivity and no wild populations as such are known. Now we start with the main threatened categories: critically endangered, endangered and vulnerable. These are subjective definitions. The objective part we will come later on. So taxon is critically endangered when it is considered to be facing an extremely high risk of extinction in the wild. Let us look into the examples. First is Namdafa flying squirrel, Bishwama yopterus bishwasi. Now this is a species which is endemic to Arunachal Pradesh, and it is named after the place where it was found in 1981, first found in 1981, that is Namdafa National Park, endemic to Arunachal Pradesh. Then we have the Chinese pangolin, Menis pentadactyla. Then Indian vulture Gyps indicus. Now this is a very sorry state of affair. Now these between 1992 and 1993 and 2004, between we may say from 1993 to 2004, 99% of three vulture species found in India, the white back, the slender billed and long billed vulture, they all perished. And the reason was very strange. The reason was a drug which was used as a painkiller in the cattle, that is diclofenac. And when these vultures they fed upon the carcasses of the cattle which were injected with diclofenac, they perished. Now to check the extinction of these birds, today vulture conservation and breeding centers have been set up in India, and there is one in Assam in Belguri, other in West Bengal, Rajai Bhatwa. It is in Pinjore, Haryana, also in Pakistan and Nepal. Then we have Bengal florican, Oberopsis bengalensis, it is found in Kaziranga National Park, Manas National Park, and also Urang National Park in Assam. Then from the reptile side, critically endangered is the gharial Gavialis gangeticus, endangered. A taxon is considered endangered when it is considered to be facing a very high risk of extinction in the wild. So now we look into the different examples of endangered species. First is the tiger, Panthera tigris, and it was accorded the status of national animal in 1973. It is also recognized as an umbrella species as well as a flagship species. Next is Indian elephant, Elephas maximus. In October 2010, Government of India declared Indian elephant as the national heritage animal. Next is the Ganges river dolphin, Platanista gangetica, and it has been declared as a national aquatic animal by Government of India in October 2009. Next is pygmy hog. Now this forms an interesting case in the sense that for a few years from now it was listed as critically endangered, but today it is listed as endangered by IUCN. Thanks to the program called Pygmy Hawk Conservation Program, which was set up in Assam for the captive breeding of the species. The headquarters of the program are in Bochishta, and two reintroduction centers were set up, one at Nameri National Park at the Potasali camp and other in Urang National Park. In around 2016, around 100 captive bred pygmy hogs were already released into the wild. The program is today being looked after by our own very active NGO, Aranyak. Next is the white-winged wood duck as a Cornis scutulata, and it is declared as the state bird of Assam. Now, all these species together are examples of endangered species. Vulnerable. A taxon is vulnerable when it is considered to be facing a high risk of extinction in the wild. We have eastern woollock gibbon, which is the only non-human ape found in India. Rhinoceros unicornis, definitely it is vulnerable. Then Bengal slow loris, Nycticebus bengalensis. Fin's weaver, Plotius megarynchus. It is of the same genus as Plotius philippensis, which is found more commonly, and the nest of the Baya weaver bird. Both are almost of the same structure. From the reptile side, we have the Indian soft-shelled turtle, Nilsonia gangetica, which falls into the vulnerable category. Near threatened. So, if a species being assessed according to the criteria of IUCN does not immediately fall into the threatened categories, that is critically endangered, endangered or vulnerable now, but there is a chance that it may qualify for any of these categories in the near future, then it is called near threatened. Example is Hume's pheasant, next, least concern. A taxon is least concerned when it neither falls in the threatened category nor does it fall in the near threatened category. These are basically widespread and abundant taxa. Example, well, of a common minor, Acridotheris tristis. Data deficient. A taxon is data deficient when adequate information is not present. So it has not been assessed, it could not be assessed because there was inadequate information and it is not categorized as a category of threat. Example, we have the Central Asian cobra, Naja oxiana, which is data deficient in the sense that assessment could not be made because enough data was not available. Not evaluated, as we had talked earlier, all species will under from the IUCN viewpoint will fall under two categories: either they have been evaluated or they have not been evaluated. So now we look into the objective criteria for delineation of the threatened categories, namely the critically endangered, the endangered, and vulnerable. When we say objective criteria, we basically mean quantitative criteria. Now, there are many criteria which are listed uh, for delineation of the threatened categories by IUCN, and we are going to have a comparative look on a few of these criteria. And it should be remembered that a species may be listed as threatened by more than one criteria at a particular time. First is reduction in population size. Now, what is taken as the standard is that in the last 10 years or three generations, and causes clearly reversible and understood and seized. Suppose we are talking of poaching. Fine, definitely we can reverse it. It is understood maybe that the species is going down because of poaching. Then causes in the last 10 years or three generations, causes may not have ceased or may not have understood or may not be reversible. Suppose if it is an issue of say habitat degradation or habitat loss, it may not be reversible at the present moment. So these two issues, in the first issue, if the population fall has been more than or equal to 90%, it will be classified as critically endangered, more than or equal to 70%, then endangered, more than or equal to 50%, it is vulnerable. In the second case, more than or equal to 80%, CR, more than or equal to 50%, endangered, and more than or equal to 30%, that is vulnerable. Then projected or suspected decline in the next 10 years or three generations, that is what do we project. Say we if we are able to say that the decline will be around more than or equal to 80%, then the species is categorized as critically endangered, more than or equal to 50%, then endangered, and more than and equal to 30%, then it is vulnerable. So this is on the basis of reduction in population size. So next is the geographical range. Now, when we talk of geographical range, there are two things which come to our mind. One is the extent of occurrence and the area of occupancy. For this, let us look into an example first as to what is the difference between these two. Say, we take up the example of distribution of rhinoceros in Assam. So here we have the Kaziranga National Park where it is found. Then we have the Urang National Park. Then we have Pobitora Wildlife Sanctuary. And then we have Manas National Park. So these are the places where Rhinoceros unicornis is found in Assam. Now, if we were to calculate the geographical range, we will have to draw a line somewhere around like this. Fine, taking all the four reserves together. So that would be the geographical range of the distribution of rhinoceros in Assam. But if we look into the area of occupancy, we will have to look into the areas of these reserves individually. And Kaziranga is 858 square kilometers, Urang is around 78, Pobitora is 38, and Manas National Park is 500 square kilometer. So area of occupancy is around 1475 square kilometers only, which is much lesser than the total range of distribution of rhinoceros in Assam. So if the extent of occurrence is less than 100 square kilometer, it is defined as critically endangered, less than 5,000 square kilometer endangered, less than 20,000 square kilometer vulnerable, area of occupancy less than 10 square kilometer critically endangered, less than 500 square kilometer endangered, and less than 2000 square kilometer, it is classified as vulnerable. Next is population size, mature individuals and estimated continuing decline. So today we have suppose fewer than 250 individuals left out and there is a continuing decline, so that it is expected that 25% will decline within 3 years or one generation, then it is classified as critically endangered. The number today is fewer than 2,500 and there is a continuing decline going on, and it is estimated that it will be 20% within the next 5 years or two generations, then it is classified as endangered. Fewer than 10,000 individuals, decline of 10% within 10 years or three generations, it is classified as vulnerable. If we go by the population size alone, then less than 50 simply critical endangered, less than 250 endangered, and less than 1000 is vulnerable. Then we also calculate the probability of extinction in the wild, and 50% within next 10 years or three generations, then it is classified as critically endangered. If it is 20%, then it is endangered, and 10% within the next 100 years, then it is classified as vulnerable. Now, what are the uses of the red list? Now, it helps guide scientific research. Say, academics from research institutions worldwide export IUCN red list data for research purposes on a daily basis. It is so very much needed to guide proper research into the threatened species. Informing policy and conventions. The IUCN Red List is used to inform decisions taken by multilateral environmental agreements. Suppose we have the Ramsar Convention, we have the Convention on CITES, Convention on International Trade for Endangered Species. So all these conventions basically take use of the IUCN Red List to frame their own conditions. Influencing resource allocation. Foundations use data from assessments on the IUCN Red List to guide their investments for conservation. Say if a particular organization has to put in resources, money resources for conservation, it definitely, most of them do look into the IUCN Red List as to where the conservation resources should be directed. Informing conservation planning. Several conservation planning methodologies use IUCN Red List to identify areas for conservation. That is, which areas we should conserve first. That is decided most of the time by the fact as to whether threatened species exist in that area or not. Education and raising awareness. New information from Red List generates significant media interest. There's a lot of talk in the media when some information, new information from the Red List comes in. There are a lot of TV shows, there's writing in the newspapers and the like. And this helps to raise the public awareness, which is so much necessary for conservation measures. It contributes to human health. How? Red list data are used in investigating the distribution of species that are known to be suspected vectors of diseases. Now, there are certain limitations of the red list also. The species groups covered so far are biased towards terrestrial and in particular forest ecosystem. So there has been much less attention paid to the aquatic ecosystems. Among the better documented species again, there is also a strong bias towards animal rather than plants and fungi. Plants and fungi are catching up, but the main focus has been on animals. Extinction risk assessments have been completed only for around 5% of the described species. So that is not a very big thing, but even then a lot of work has been done. Lastly, the red list cannot provide an overall estimate for how many of the planet's species are threatened. Fine. Say, suppose we have estimated 10,000 species, and of that 5% of them are endangered. Now this data cannot be extrapolated to say that of the 1.4 million species known throughout the world, so 5% will be endangered or threatened. That cannot be said. So these are the limitations of the red list. Now these are the references you can go through. Fine. Two books are mine, and basic help I have taken is from IUCNredlist.org. So your feedback would be most welcome. You can mail your feedback to ras.manideep@gmail.com. Thank you.